Good evening. Welcome to our 2020 Forum series here at Florida Today. Tonight we're hosting our first forum of this season featuring U.S. House District 8, which covers Brevard and Indian River counties, as well as part of Orange County. Because of COVID-19, we want to make sure everybody's safe. So that's why we're doing all of our forums this year via live video. That's why you're probably watching us via Facebook or online. Tonight's forum is organized by Florida Today as well as Treasure Coast newspapers, both part of the USA Today network. Our partners are the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast and Eastern Florida State College. I am Isadora Rangel. I will be your co-host tonight, and I'm also the engagement editor at Florida Today. My co-host will be Larry Reisman. He is the community editor at Treasure Coast newspapers, and he is based in Indian River County. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
There are two Republicans running in the August 18th primary elections. They are Congressman Bill Posey and his opponent, Scott Caine. Welcome, gentlemen. And the winner of that primary will face Democrat Jim Kennedy in the November 3rd general elections. He's also present. Welcome. So the candidates will have each 1 minute to answer questions from me and Larry. They also get a 30-second rebuttal if their opponent brings them up. And now let's begin with our opening statements. And we're going to go with Congressman Posey first, and you have 1 minute, Congressman.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I grew up in this district, met and married my wife here. This is where we decided to work and raise a family. Since you elected me to Congress, I've passed dozens of initiatives, mostly bipartisan, to create jobs necessary for a healthy society, keep America first in space, support our troops, law enforcement, and seniors, and of course, clean up our lagoon. I will continue to oppose open borders, reckless spending, congressional pay raises, and congressional perks. And I will continue to return my pay raise every year and make Congress more accountable and transparent for you. I'd like to share with you just for 1 minute verbatim what President Trump says about me. Congressman Bill Posey is a tremendous fighter for the great state of Florida.
You have 10 seconds.
Supporter of MAGA agenda, strong on crime, Second Amendment, loves our veterans and law enforcement, and has my complete and total endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Jim Kennedy, and I'm running to be your next representative in Congress. I'm running because we have to do better. We must do better than an economy that benefits only the top 1%. Americans are hurting economically, socially, and medically, and our government is not doing enough to solve these problems. Our economy works better when everyone gets a fair shot, everyone pays their fair share, and everyone plays by the same rules. We must do better than a justice system that fails to treat all of our citizens equally. We have access to the sum total of human learning in our pockets, and we still have people who think the world is flat, vaccines are bad, that force is the only way to address an issue, and poverty could be solved if citizens just worked harder. My policies will guarantee that everyone who works hard and plays by the rules has the opportunity to live the American dream. My name is Jim Kennedy. I'm a veteran and a father and a scientist at the Space Coast, and I am ready to represent you in Congress because we can do better by working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Caine.
Thank you, Isadora, and thank you, the League of Women Voters, Eastern Florida State College, Florida Today, and the TC Palm for providing us the opportunity to speak directly to our fellow citizens. Folks, it's quite clear that we live in an unprecedented time. While our country faces many tough challenges, I believe one of our biggest threats is the attack of our foundational principles and values. We live in the greatest country on the planet and are guided by the greatest governing document ever written, the United States Constitution. Unfortunately, there are many people espousing ideas that run contrary to those thoughtfully portrayed by our founding fathers. Now is the wrong time to follow a tired path while loud, misguided voices tout the greatness of socialism. Now is the time for bold, new conservative voices with a proven record of leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for Congress because I developed a unique set of skills and experiences over my 30-year Air Force career that not only give me great understanding of many complex issues, but gives me the proven leadership needed to counter the socialist agenda threatened in our way of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I'm going to begin with our first question. Obviously, it is about the COVID-19 pandemic that's on the minds of many voters. But I want to hear from you. I want you to outline plans that you think the federal government should be putting in place to prepare for a potential second wave of COVID-19 infections. And Mr. Kennedy, you're going to go first this time.
All right, well, thank you very much, Isadora. So the federal government has done a good job, well, a fair job so far with the CARES Act. It was a good relief, but going forward, we're definitely going to need much more of a recovery effort to be brought out by the Congress, Senate, and then eventually approved by the president. We need to get people back to work, and it needs to focus on the bottom first. It needs to focus on families, small business, and we need to close all these loopholes that we saw in the original CARES Act that sent billions of dollars to oversized corporations because there was no transparency from it. We're now looking at almost $500 billion being spent with no accountability, even though it was promised it would be in there. So with these closed loopholes and a relief act to get people to work, we definitely can get the economy, going back again and get people back to work. But we have to do it after it's safe. We cannot send people back to school, cannot send workers out there when there's no health care to back them up and save them.
Thank you. Mr. Caine, you're next.
Well, certainly this is a big challenge for our country right now. There are a lot of people that talk about, following the science when we go through this pandemic. I believe that the science is a little difficult to really follow right now because you hear something different from somebody different every day. I follow the United States military statistics every day. I look at how many people in our military have contracted the virus and how many of them have died from it. Currently, about 15,000 U.S. members of the United States military, and that's out of 1.5 million to 2 million members, have contracted or tested positive for the virus, and we have had 3 fatalities. What that tells me is that there is a group of people that really need to be back to work. We need Americans to do what Americans do, and it's to be innovative and out in society, and we need to do it as safely as possible. The United States military is a perfect example of how to execute the mission and do it properly. And so my plan is to get us back to work safely.
Thank you. Mr. Posey?
Well, thank you. COVID-19 is a horrible, unforeseen pandemic for sure. The greatest fear was our hospitals would be overwhelmed and there would be insufficient personnel and equipment to treat the sick. Fortunately, that has not happened yet. Congress has worked to minimize the financial impact negative on our citizens by passing the CARES Act, which I was happy to co-sponsor. And I might add, my amendment allowed thousands of NASA contractor and defense contractor personnel not to end up in the unemployment line. My office and I are busy every day helping people navigate the systems to locate the proper assistance. Loneliness, desperation, and isolation also cause deaths. We can't let the treatment be worse than the disease. I think we should reopen our schools as soon as it can be done safely, and we need to follow the consensus advice of the experts.
Thank you. Now, Larry, you're going to ask the next question with Mr. Caine going first.
Thank you. Mr. Caine, the $600 per week in federal unemployment benefits approved by Congress earlier this year expires at the end of July. Should Congress expand those benefits? If so, should the $600 remain the same? If not, what can Congress do to assist the millions of Americans who have lost their jobs and won't have them back by the beginning of August?
Well, Larry, the CARES Act and all the efforts we've had to take care of our families while we're out of work during this pandemic were necessary evils in my mind. We need to incentivize people for going back to work. And frankly, I'm not a fan of adding extra incentive. I talked to a business owner today who said that, for some of his employees, it's a decision between coming to work or not going to work and receiving unemployment. So my thoughts is that we need to incentivize people to work when they can do so safely and continue to get the economy going as opposed to just having people sit at their home. So once again, the pandemic is a horrible thing, but the economic engine that drives this country isn't the only thing. It's also the way of life of human beings. And we need to figure out a good way to get people back to work and not to incentivize people not working.
Thank you. Mr. Posey, you're next.
Sadly, the $600 that Larry talked about in unemployment is more than most people not most people, but some people make. And so it has disincentivized people to go back to work, which is unfortunate. Some of us tried to put a cap on there saying you would get your state unemployment and up to $600 in benefits, equal to the pay that you were losing. Unfortunately, in the negotiations, that lost out. So we're still analyzing the effectiveness. And if there's a round two of the CARES Act, it's going to have to be adjusted accordingly.
All right. So let's move on. We can go back to COVID-19 later, but I want to move on to the topic of
Isadora,
Isadora?
do I not get to
I'm
answer?
so sorry. I am so sorry, Mr. Kennedy. Go ahead.
Thank you. The $600 was a good start. It is a relief for people. It is definitely a Band-Aid. Unfortunately, most people in Florida, it was tied to unemployment. And we saw what a calamity our state unemployment system has been for so many people that were put out of work. Rushing people back to work that don't have health care because they're minimum wage workers, they can't afford it, their company doesn't provide it, is just going to get more people killed. We know this. Every other developed country in the world that has universal health care or has given relief to their citizens has watched their COVID numbers down. For us, Florida is now the epicenter of the whole country and the whole world for COVID cases. I know Scott had mentioned about the military. They just had over 120 cases at Cherry Point just this last day. So getting people back to work and not giving them anything is crazy. I would support an extension of the $600 to keep people going until we actually have the virus under control instead of just running back. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's finally move on to our next question. And I want us to talk about police reform and race in America. Since the death of George Floyd, there have been different police reform proposals floated in Congress. Please name specific police reforms you support, if any. And Mr. Posey, you're going first.
Okay. What happened to George Floyd was absolutely horrible. And the people responsible for that need to be, and they are being held responsible. Violent mobs are also unacceptable. And I've spoken on the House floor about that too. The vandals should be prosecuted. And if local governments refuse to restore order, then their federal funding needs to be cut off. I don't think our police officers are blatantly or systemically racist. I think most of them are honest men and women who are on the streets to protect us. But there are occasional bad apples, and we need to weed them out and get rid of the bad ones. I support the senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, who has an idea to better document and track abusers.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy, you're going next.
Thank you. I know this is obviously leading to that everybody's calling the defund the police, which is just a misnomer. It's not right. What we need to do is better fund the police correctly. We ask our police officers, our frontline patrolmen, to be mental health experts, to be drug addiction counselors, to be marriage counselors, and they're not fully qualified to do that in all these situations. So we need to get them the training. We need to have better people on shift, more senior people that can start responding to these different incidents that aren't just a straight criminal incident that these people are going through. So with that, I'd like to see more training. We know what happened to George Floyd is evil. I was just sitting down with our sheriff here in Brevard, and he called the officer evil, pure hate and psychopathic. It is crazy and it's terrible to watch something like that happen. Most police officers are good. We need to give them better training and more help to deal with these situations that they're not trained for and they're not there for. They're there to handle criminal complaints.
Thank you. Mr. Caine.
Well, once again, I echo what the other two gentlemen said about the George Floyd situation. Obviously, that is unacceptable, should never happen in our society. And unfortunately, it does from time to time. Once again, it does need to be prosecuted, and we use the justice system as it was intended to be used in order to bring people to justice. As far as the police reform is concerned, I too agree that we need more funding instead of less funding. Instead of defunding the police, let's provide more funding for their salaries and their training so that we get better trained and better prepared police force to deal with the issues at hand. The simple problem is that when you say that we're just going to take away some of their duties, how do you deal with a 911 call when somebody shows up at a home and It's supposed to be a
10 seconds.
just a little dispute between people, and it ends up being a situation with a firearm. You need the police.
Thank you. And Larry's going to ask the next question with Mr. Kennedy going first.
Thank you. Please give an example of something specific you've done that has displayed your commitment to improving lives of people who are members of groups that have been discriminated against.
Well, as a disabled veteran myself, I've been a veteran. I've been a member of the VFW, Disabled American Veterans, and other groups, and I've spent a lot of my time working with them. As you know, Mr. Caine it will attest, getting through the medical and VA system is not always the easiest. So helping people navigate that, I've volunteered my time for that. I've also volunteered for helping people in the legal system. There's a great concern with people with PTSD and about how police and everyone deals with them. With that, I've sat in. We have a we're starting to do a program here where a 911 caller asks if someone's a veteran. That way, a PTSD counselor can be assigned with the police. So going forward with that, we've also these Black Lives Matters movement. People are hurting. There's racism in America, and we cannot legislate it away. We need to start doing something and talking about these issues and not putting them buried.
Mr. Caine, you're next.
Well, frankly, the time I spent in the United States Air Force was eye-opening for me. The cross-section of America that you see when you serve in the military is just a wonderful thing. I served with people from all over the country, from all walks of life, and learned a lot of stories of people that I probably wouldn't have if I just sat here in Indian River County. I tell you a story about helping an individual that came from Chicago, and he left Chicago because he had a baby and a wife, and looked around, and all of his friends were either in jail or being killed. And he said, what I need is to get out of here and find a new life. And so he joined the United States Air Force. And then as part of his mission in the United States Air Force, I got to partner with that individual to help him become a better person and be better trained for society. And it was a touchdown.
Thank you. Mr. Posey.
No, thank you. I have honored the legacy of Harry and Harriet Moore in many ways. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They were civil rights workers, martyred, had their home blown up on Christmas Eve, and both of them died. I got the appropriation to build the Harry and Harriet Moore home site, which is a fabulous place to go visit. I named the Cocoa Post Office after Harry and Harriet Moore, as well as recreation facilities and a community center in Fellsmere in Indian River County. I also saluted the 165th Infantry, the Puerto Rican regiment known as the Buccaneers, with the Congressional Gold Medal to honor them. They were the last segregated unit in the United States Armed Services, and they were terribly discriminated against. And when we had the ceremony, there were tears in the eyes of everyone who ever served in that. They just never felt like they had their due recognition for the sacrifices that they made. General MacArthur said he wished he had more soldiers like them.
Thank you. I want to move on now to the issue of how you would govern and about the issue of bipartisanship, which we know is so crucial nowadays. We talked about police reform, about COVID, but I would like to know, how would you go about working with across the aisle to make sure that, say, a police reform package or any other COVID relief gets passed? Can you tell me specific things that you would do? And Mr. Caine, I'm going to start with you.
Well, Zora, thanks for that question, because it really plays right into the wheelhouse of where I came from. A lot of people have a misconception about the United States military. They think that it's, kind of my way or the highway when you're a senior officer. But frankly, the way the military functions so well is that people in the military work very well together to solve problems. I have a saying that I stole from a friend of mine that says, we need people to solve problems, not admire problems. And so the strategy that I'll use is that instead of calling people names, I'm going to go to Washington, D.C., and I will reach across the aisle and find things that are common ground that we can actually agree upon. And instead of calling somebody, a name when it's all done, put your arm around them and say, hey, you're a brother or a sister, and we got something done together. But it's really about the strategy of believing you can solve a problem as opposed to the strategy of thinking that, well, we have too many differences. So solving problems is is the answer, and it's by working together.
Mr. Posey?
I have an incredible history of being able to work across the aisle. John McCarthy of your paper wrote an article one time, and it had quotes from some of the other people across the aisle. And the minority leader, Steve Geller, said, Posey's a rock grid conservative, all right, but when we're looking for somebody to work with across the aisle, he's the first guy that we go to. That should be in your somewhere. I've co-sponsored legislation with Debbie Wasserman Schultz when she was chairman of the DEC, and it was her job to take me out. Gregory Meeks, Sheila Jackson Lee, Derek Kilmer, Al Lawson, Susan Bonamici, Charlie Crist. I mean, the list can go on and on. I just have a reputation for doing that. I'm empathetic to them. They appreciate me. I've co-sponsored stuff with them as they co-sponsor my stuff. It really helped them when we were in minority, and it really helps me now when I'm in the minority.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy?
Well, as a scientist and an engineer, this is what I've been doing my whole life. Nobody exists in a vacuum. You have to work. At the Kennedy Space Center, I work with mechanical, civil, chemical engineers. We always are bouncing ideas off each other, and everyone comes at it with a different perspective. As I said, I'm reaching out to everyone in our district, everyone in Indian River, everyone in Brevard. Door is always open. I want to hear what the people of our area want to know is going on. In Congress, I will continue to do that. I will continue to reach across the aisle because as a moderate, I'm very much in the middle. I believe we do need to move forward, but I need to move forward in smart scientific ways. We need to listen to the experts on specific issues and not just go with, who's giving us the biggest campaign donation. I will move forward, I will talk, and I would be more than happy to work with any caucus, especially like the Estuary Caucus, to clean up our waters.
Thank you. And Larry, you have the next question, and Mr. Posey is going first.
Thank you. Congressman Posey, when was the last time you changed your mind on a political issue? Please explain when and what it was and how it came to be.
Larry, I can't think of the last time I changed my mind on a political issue. That's really not how I prepare for debate. I wasn't really ready for that question, but my mind has been changed oftentimes, and it's often done through amendments. Something that might seem not very good for you now, you can file an amendment to it, and you can make it tasteful, and so change your mind about the entire bill. I've almost lived by the amendatory process, since it's so hard to get bills passed. They do pass a few hundred bills out of thousands and thousands of them a year. So often, I will wrap my bills into a larger bill and get them passed in that way. Sometimes there's a bill that you don't like, and you can file an amendment and take the poison pill out of it, or the bad part out of it. And I've done that multiple times. I just, can't grab one out of the air for you right now.
Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy?
This is a very easy one for me. Not too long ago, just a few years ago, I was of the impression, that the insurance system we have in the United States is good. I was working, we'll go from there. I was laid off, as a lot of people are, and COBRA was going to be about $3,000 for 3 weeks of coverage between when I started one job and the next. During that time, I was lucky enough to take my motorcycle and crash it, and I had no health care coverage. I was in a wheelchair for a while, hospital for a while, and then rehab. So seeing that and seeing how close people are to issues drove me to start this whole process. Now seeing the COVID crisis come around, where there are so many people, we had to fight to get the insurance to cover everything. We're going to have to fight to do this. I started at a universal, just if you got it, you get it, use the Obamacare, make it more transparent. Now I'm seeing that we need a universal option for everyone, whether they're working or not, whether they're employed or not. We need something for everyone out there.
Mr. Caine?
Thank you.
Well, the last thing that I changed my mind on that was a big issue in our government is term limits. I used to believe that our system was built to allow turnover and that it would naturally occur. But watching what does occur in Washington, D.C. is that term limits actually go we need term limits to get the turnover we need. From my time in the United States Air Force, when I took command of a fighter squadron, it was a 2-year event. I knew when I was going to start, I knew when I was going to end, and I knew what I needed to accomplish in that 2 years. So I got it done. And I knew who was going to, the people I was trying to replace me. And the beauty of that system is that you're always trying to get the people below you better trained so that they can do the job that you're about to lead. I believe, if you have term limits of 12 years in Congress, in 12 years, people are going to, as you get closer to the end, you're going to be bringing up the younger congressman to be your replacement. And I think it makes their country much more.
Thank you. And speaking of accomplishing things, my question is along those lines. What single thing do you want to have accomplished by the end of a full 2-year term? And Mr. Kennedy, you're going first.
I would like to see a comprehensive health care reform across our country. The Affordable Care Act brought transparency to the insurance system because we don't have a healthcare system here in the United States. We have an insurance system. People need to not be worried about how they're going to get treated. They can't go back to work if they know they're going to die. And the cost of it is just overwhelming for some people, especially with such a low minimum wage as we do here in Florida. So in the first 2 years, I would like to see a strengthening of the Affordable Care Act, where there's a public option for everyone to get on it, whether it's through if they're unemployed or whether their work is too small to offer it, to where they can actually live a life healthy, because we know that healthy workers are going to work better. They're going to be a more productive economy. So why not take care of the people right at the start and focus on that? Thank you.
Mr. Caine, you're next.
Well, there are a lot of challenges we have out in front of us right now. The most important challenge I think we face is a rising China. I spent a lot of my adult life studying China and the threat that they present to us. I think that we need to have legislation in place that's going to help America rebuild its manufacturing base and to push off the threat of Chinese intervention in our country. The biggest thing that they're about to do is 5G, and we need to get 5G under control in the United States of America so we can lead the way in 5G. Because if we don't, then we are going to fall behind China with all of our friends and allies across the planet, and they will be connected to China instead of connected to the United States. So we need to very, very rapidly get manufacturing back in the United States with a focus on 5G so that we are the leader in telecommunications and China is not.
Thank you. And the question again is, what would you like to get accomplished by the end of your 2-year term? Mr. Posey, you're next.
Well, as you know, I've been about transparency. I passed a 72-hour rule, which required Congress to have publicly available legislation before you're required to vote on it for 72 hours. I've also passed a rule that requires them to print it in a way that you can actually understand it. It's really simple. I'd like to see that come to fruition. It's in the rules. They just haven't complied with it yet. I'd also like to see a balanced budget, and that would involve perhaps even using accounting ABDA, the activity-based total accountability that I wrote the book about, and makes agencies account for what they actually accomplish, not just how much money they spend. And you could read that online for free at billposey.com. Finally, I'd like to see an end to sequestration. That has really devastated our military. It hurts their ability to plan. Obviously, it hurts their funding. Thank you.
Thank you. And Larry, you got the next question with Mr. Caine answering first.
Thank you. The Indian River Lagoon is one of the most important local issues in this race. Can you please outline what each of you has done in the past year to help the lagoon?
Well, I'm not certain that I have personally helped the lagoon too much in the past year. However, as a member of Congress, what my intent is that we need to have federal legislation that helps the state solve its own problem. I believe that the state understands better how to take care of its waterways, and our waterways are our natural resource. So what we need is to help the state from the federal level take care of all of our water across the state, but specifically the Indian River Lagoon for us, because it's our bread and butter that we live by. And that really goes to my desire to get the federal government out of the state business and help provide them the necessary funds to accomplish what they need, and then allow the state to do what it does best. Thank you.
Mr. Posey, you're next.
Wow, I don't know how much time I'm going to have, but we have 28 estuaries. They all have the same issues. That's why I founded the Estuary Caucus with 38 members of Congress, as we have power in numbers, and over 80 to 100 members of staff participating in it, being educated on the needs. I restored the National Estuary Program after OMB zeroed it out. I restored funding for the Prescott Marine Mammal Research and Rescue Program after OMB zeroed it out. And actually, the estuary funding program, I actually got us an increase in that after I got the funding restored. I passed the Harmful Algal Bloom and Hypoxia Research Control Act. I created the Estuary Urgent Needs Priority Act program, which gives grants for estuaries with critical needs like ours. I got funding, or actually I got them in the program, the FUDS program, the FUDS and the PFAS program, by contacting the EPA administrator and the Corps of Engineers to protect the groundwater on our beaches.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
Personally, as you asked, I personally have worked beach cleanups, Indian River Lagoon cleanups, because I know, as a scientist, I know the Indian River Lagoon is one of our greatest treasures in this area. As Congressman Posey mentioned, the Estuaries Caucus was a great start. They need to go forward. It's been together for quite a few years, but people consistently vote to weaken the Clean Water Act in Congress. So we need to turn that around. We've self-taxed ourselves here in this district to take care of and start the cleanup. We need to get more muck out. We need to stop putting bad muck in. We know it's biosolids that are the bad thing in, and yet we still, allow corporations to dump them and let them trickle into our waterways. So going forward, what I've done for the Indian River Lagoon is very, small because it's a personal, but going forward as a congressman, I would definitely have a lot more to say. I would support the Clean Water Act, support the EPA, reinforce them, and go from there.
Thank you. My next question is also about the environment, and that is, do you believe that climate is changing and that humans are the primary driver of this change? And also, what is your plan to address these impacts at the federal level? And Mr. Posey, you're going first.
Okay. As you probably already know, I'm a member of the Climate Change Caucus. America has led the world in reducing emissions since 2003. The problem that we have is China and other countries have not done their part. I formed a bipartisan estuary caucus that got left out of the last discussion, and passed bipartisan law creating competitive grants that will help clean up our local environment. I focus a lot on local environment because that's what we have the most control about.
And just to clarify, do you believe that climate change is caused by human activity? Just to clarify.
I believe human activity has a role in it. Nobody's been able to pinpoint exactly how much of a role human activity has in it, but yes, clearly I think humans have a role in it.
Thank you. And Mr. Kennedy, you're going next.
Well, as a scientist, we know that climate change is massively affected by humans. We saw this in the 70s with the airborne lead from leaded fuels. We got rid of it. It was easy to measure to see that change. The volatile organic compounds are what creates ozone. We know all these things. This is known facts. Going forward, for climate change, we have to do better. We, at the Space Coast, the Kennedy Space Center, they've already instituted a project to have the dunes raised. They've raised them about 10 to 15 feet, I'd say, to protect the infrastructure that they have there that's been taking us to space for 50 years. So trying to deny it or move it on is just silly. So going forward, we need to do more. We'd start with green initiatives. We'd start with carbon reclamation. We'd start with photovoltaics, wind, solar. All these different things are ways to help the environment. Leaving the Paris Peace Accords was a wrong move.
Thank you. And again, for those who are just joining us, the question again is if the candidates believe that if climate change is caused by human activity, and if so, what do they think the federal government should do to address that? And Mr. Caine, you're going next.
Well, certainly climate change is something that occurs. The degree that the humans affected is not really determined at this point. However, like everything, all of the environment affects itself. So there's no doubt that what we do as human beings have some effect on climate. What's pretty interesting though is that when you get on a train and you drive, chug along to Jian from anywhere in China, about every 5 miles there's a smokestack pouring black smoke into the air. And so what it tells me is that while we have been leading the world with climate change here or with environmental issues in the United States of America, we need to put a bigger sledgehammer to what the Chinese are doing and hold them accountable for their actions as well. So, while we did get out of the climate accord, it was because China's not being held accountable, and we need to hold them that way.
Thank you. Larry, you got the next question.
Gentlemen, what can you do if elected to ensure the space industry remains vibrant on the Space Coast, and how do you think that should occur?
Mr. Kennedy, you're going first.
Thank you. Larry, great question. As a rocket scientist, I'm very interested in that. This is the greatest dream of anybody that starts with STEM, is to end up here. So I am very lucky. The best way to see it going forward, and we're seeing this now, is with folks like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, the corporate investment in it, as well as leadership by the government and investment by the government. We can continue to keep going forward through all the different programs they have coming up, exploring the stars. Not only that, but I'd like to see investment here in the Space and Treasure Coast in advancing our residents by more education, building vocational schools, more technical schools, so that we're getting the talent that we need at all these space jobs, and we don't have to import it from all over the world. We need to bring up the education level so that our people here, our residents, are the ones that are going to get these jobs. So bringing them in, a mix of government and corporate.
Thank you.
Mr. Caine.
Well, I've been a huge supporter of the space industry, Space Force since I was a little kid, just like everybody else probably around here. When I attended the School of Advanced Air and Space Studies in Alabama, I learned quite a bit about space, and at that point is when I became an advocate for U.S. Space Force, which was contrary to most of the officers that I served with in the Air Force. But I've been a big advocate for that because I think what that has done for us is that it enables the professionals who understand space in our military to take it to the next level. And then once again, we need to do public-private partnerships, as we have done with SpaceX, to take the innovative spirit of Americans and to create as much as we can in that space industry. And I think the president is spot on with the Space Force. And I think that the SpaceX is a great example of how we work together between the public and the private to make the space something we lead in once again.
Thank you. And the question again is, what will you do to keep our space industry vibrant on the Space Coast? Mr. Posey.
Well, in our office, we have a motto. We sell space every day in every way. Every intern knows it. Every fellow knows it. Of course, every staff member knows it. Congressman Babler from Texas, our lead Republican on the Space Committee, says he knows of no greater and more effective advocate for space than Bill Posey. I founded Space Advocates, which has 40 to 80 staff participants to help spread the word and educate members. We have great, interesting experts come in and speak to them about space, and they spread the word. I passed the Commercial Space Support Vehicle Act. I passed the Commercial Race for Space Act. I passed the Space Resource Exploration and Utilization Act, which was the first space law in history. I got the Apollo 50th Anniversary Commemorative Appointment passed, which gave $2.6 million non-taxpayer money, voluntarily paid by coin collectors, to the Astronaut Memorial Foundation, to the Astronaut Scholarship Foundation, $5 million to the Smithsonian Institute Air and Space, helped push for record high funding for commercial crew and KSC ground systems. The KSC, we do the ground systems, no ground systems.
We'll move on to the next topic. I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about this one as well, Mr. Posey. And the next topic is immigration. What, if any, steps should Congress take to reform current immigration policies? And should that allow a pathway to citizenship for immigrants who are in the country undocumented? And the first one to go is Mr. Caine on immigration reform.
Well, immigration reform is something that we've been talking about solving for a very long time. First and foremost, in order to get our arms around immigration reform, we have to know who's in the country illegally. And we need to make sure that the people that get here do it through an illegal process. So let's make sure that we have a wall built so that we can secure our southern border. And then let's look at how we take care of the people that are already here. Now, there are certainly opportunities for some people that are here, the dreamers, the DACA folks, to look at opportunities there to see if indeed there are some of those that should be able to stay. But frankly, what we really need to do is to ensure that we've got a system in place that allows people to come here legally under a merit-based system and not a family-based system, and then adjudicate those that are here illegally and push them back to where they came from. Thank you.
Mr. Posey, you're next on immigration reform.
Thank you. I have been to the border, personally to the border. I went to the Nogales border. I've seen the drug running. I've seen the gun running. I've seen the gangs come through. I've seen the human trafficking that's allowed by having a porous border. And of course, I voted to secure the border, and I support full funding of the border. I've co-sponsored legislation to end the separation policy, that is to increase housing and immigration judges to alleviate that particular problem we're having there. I've introduced a bill to end the dangerous visa lottery system, where people come into our country unvetted and commit crimes, have been responsible for murdering Americans. We must gain operational control over our southern border, and then I will be open to discussing pathways to citizenship, which I am not opposed to. We just need to get operational control of the border, or we'll just make the matter worse.
10 seconds. Mr. Kennedy, you're next.
Thank you. As the two gentlemen before me have said, I approve a pathway to citizenship. There should be a way to go forward. Supreme Court has recently ruled that DACA needs to go forward. Denying these people and putting these kids in cages is not the way to do it. My opponent also said that he's been down to the border, which he probably has. I don't doubt that. There's very little wall there, and the wall that has been put up was built by taking money from military families, which I am vehemently against. The other thing is the fact that most illegal immigrants don't come through the Mexican border. They come through our airports. They overstay on visas. The percentage of illegal immigration that enters in America simply through that one border that everybody likes to put and scream, put up a wall, is minor compared to where it's coming from other places. So I would rather see a more comprehensive approach, a better visa system, and a better pathway for citizenship for people that are already here. Thank you.
Larry, you got the next question. And Mr. Posey is going first answering.
You're muted, Larry.
Sorry about that. We're going to stick with immigration here, but I'd like you to be very specific for a second. Passing immigration reform would require bipartisan support, some compromise here, perhaps, for each of you. Please name specific reforms that you and the opposite party can reach a compromise on.
Well, Larry, we haven't even started the discussion yet. Well, we have had some discussions about it. And before they did the last immigration reform, they funded closing the border. They funded putting up a wall. They funded operational control of the border. But guess what? They never did it. So although they solved the problem 2 decades ago, here we are back with the problem even worse. So I think before I agree to anything to reform immigration, I want operational control over the border this time. We got ripped off last time. If they'd have done it last time, we would not have the problem we have now. But I think the first step, before I'm going to negotiate on this stuff, is that we get operational control of the border again so we don't get tricked again.
Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. As I said in my last statement, the border with Mexico is not our major issue. And there are many congressmen and senators in the House and Senate that know this. There's a lot of people to work with to find common ground. Most people can agree, I hope most people can agree that DACA is, the delayed entry it's good. These people have been here their entire lives. They came here as children. Why can't we start by getting them here, getting them citizenships? Maybe you have to pay a back tax or something like that. There's plenty of different options. An improved visa program, as Mr. Caine said earlier. it needs to be reformed. We are seeing millions and millions of people applying, but it's very biased and unfair to also not only what we need here for workers in America, but what country of origin you come from. The last way is just a pathway to citizenship for anybody that's already here. Trying to kick everybody out and be all very aggressive with it is not going to solve the answer.
Thank you, Mr. Caine.
Well, once again, we really need our borders secured, and that it's not just the southern border; it's all borders. And so it's a requirement to have a good visa program in place, and then also secure the southern border to ensure that we can move forward. And I think that there are people on both sides that would like to solve that part of the problem. And I think that the other issue that they would like to work together on is DACA. Now, DACA is not, as it's touted by the media, not everybody has been here their whole life and has no home back in their foreign land. A lot of them travel to and from oftentimes, and so it's not a full release of all the DACA, but it's we need to look at people individually and see what their situation is, and see who should have a pathway to citizen, not just carte blanche. Everybody gets that pathway. So between the visa, looking at the visa program and DACA, I think there's some leeway there. But once again, we absolutely need to secure our borders.
Thank you. And our next question is about healthcare. As you know, the Trump administration is trying to end the Affordable Care Act. What, if anything, should replace it? And Mr. Kennedy, you go first.
I don't think anything should replace it. I can understand there are errors with it, there are weaknesses, but one of the biggest things with it is pre-existing conditions, which the Trump administration is attacking right now. Pre-existing conditions aren't just you have cancer, it's diabetes. Insurance companies, and we have an insurance system, not a healthcare system in this country, they're trying to be allowed to have any ways to go forward and to kick you off or to raise your rates. So I wouldn't be in favor of removing the Affordable Care Act. I'd be in favor of either reforming it. Reforming it would be probably the best way to say it, to improve it so that all Americans have a path, whether it's through their work or a public option that's affordable for these people making a minimum wage. We need a healthcare system in the United States that takes care of the people first and corporations later, right? Doctors are going to make money. All this is going to happen. So the Affordable Care Act does need to be strengthened, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to go forward from here and not canceled.
Mr. Caine, what should replace the Affordable Care Act?
Well, the Affordable Care Act didn't do what it said it was going to do. Now, there are good parts of the Affordable Care Act that we need to continue to maintain. We do need to watch pre-existing conditions, but the simple fact is very, very few people are affected by the pre-existing conditions situation. The simple fact is that those that are under employee healthcare systems already are covered from pre-existing conditions. Those under Medicare are covered under pre-existing conditions. So there's a smaller slice of the population that's a case for. So we need, whatever we do needs to cover that. However, we need to do things that allow the states to work together in conjunction with each other. And we need to find a way to bring down the cost. If you are not on a plan with your employer, the ridiculously high costs of the Affordable Care Act are untenable at this point. So we need to do something to allow the corporate, the companies to have a competition together.
Thanks. Mr. Posey.
Before Obamacare, the American healthcare industry had three problems, and it was pre-existing conditions, insurance companies that actually dropped you first time you got sick, and adult children who weren't living at home. Poll after poll, survey after survey, identified those as the three big problems with our healthcare delivery system. Obamacare was supposed to take care of all that, let you keep your same doctor, let you keep your same insurance company, and cost less. It didn't keep any of those promises as well as some others. We need to return to a healthcare system that has more competition. I went to Kathleen Sebelius, who is head of the agency bringing forth Obamacare, and said, look, these are the three issues. Why don't we just get together and try and iron out a compromise on those rather than throw the baby out with the bathwater and having the government take over 1/6 of the nation's economy? And her answer to me was, because we don't want to. That's not sufficient. I think competition will drive down prices. We're starting to see now some activity in some states, and at the Capitol, prices actually advertised. So you can shop your price.
Thank you. And Lord Larry, you have the next question, and Mr. Caine will go first answering.
Sounds good. Accomplishing anything in a body as large as Congress is no easy task. How were you able to complete goals when facing large bureaucracy in the past? Pick one and explain it, please.
And just for the sake of time, because we only have 6 minutes left, I'm gonna ask you to answer the question in about 30 to 40 seconds. And my apologies for that, but I want to make sure that each of you gets a closing statement.
Well, when I was a group commander in Las Vegas, Nevada, I was offered an opportunity to get some simulation for my training exercises. They offered me $1.2 million a year for the next 3 to 5 years in order to get this simulation. Unfortunately, it wasn't something I needed. And so I turned it down. I said, we don't need to spend and waste this money when it's, not something we don't need, as opposed to how we always operate is you just take whatever you're given. So in my mind, what we need to do a much better job of is fiscal responsibility in that big government bureaucracy and turn back money and use baseline budgeting to solve that problem.
Thank you. Mr. Posey.
Well, thank you. You do whatever it takes, Larry, and real life experience at these things really helps. Isadora, your paper wrote a story about the mother whose 3 children had been kidnapped and taken to Lebanon, who was not a signatory to the Hague Convention. The Department of Justice, the FBI, the Department of State, their ambassador, our ambassador, nobody could get the kids back. I called on my problem-solving abilities and my background with budgets, and within 72 hours, I got those children safely home.
10 seconds. Thank you. And now we're going to move on to our closing statements, finally.
Would you like me to answer again?
Oh, I am so sorry, Jim. I keep doing this. My apologies. Please go.
All right. Things like this come up in the engineering and the science world all the time. The best way to do it is to confront these big bureaucracies and these big government agencies is with facts and figures. When solar photovoltaics would start becoming a huge thing, I found an unsafe method that they were being installed all around the country, and I reported it. You bring it up, you put a white paper out, and you say, look, you're going to get people killed. This is dangerous. We need to change this, and we need to reduce the 0 point energy. Well, it's more technical than we need, but yep. Excuse me. But going forward, facts and figures, not opinions, are what needs to be addressed.
My apologies again, Mr. Kennedy. Now we're actually moving on to closing statements. And again, I'm going to ask you to keep it short at roughly 30 seconds, just because for the sake of time, if you can differentiate yourself from your opponents. And Mr. Posey, you're going first.
Well, I want to thank the voters for putting their faith and trust in me over the years. I often get as angry and frustrated with Congress as you do, believe it or not. But Florida today really hit the nail on the head when they called me a problem solver, because that's what I do best. As you've heard this evening, I have the strong record of passing bipartisan, common sense measures to move America in the right direction. I didn't come to Congress to be a talking head. I came to give you 100% every day because I love our community and I love this country. Thank you. Good night.
Mr. Kennedy.
You sure you don't want to just jump over? No? Okay. I just want to say thank you very much to Florida Today, the League of Women Voters, the TC POM for putting this together. I'm willing to represent and listen to everybody. I don't just represent one section. I want to be the voice for the people here in District 8. As a scientist, I know it takes more than one person. You need these outside ideas. You can't be locked into one mentality that you've been in for 30 years and think that's going to be what changes things. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to discussing more with you.
Thank you. Mr. Caine, 35 seconds. Can you make it happen?
Well, fellow Floridians, our founding fathers intended for the government to be run by we the people. They wanted us to rotate people through the government as proven leaders from different spectrums of society, not just by holding on to professional career politicians. When we turn over our government with new ideas and new leadership, we make our country stronger. I feel led to continue serving in a different capacity with a set of skills and experiences that match our district and our times. Go to CaineForCongress.com and learn about me. Thanks a lot. You have a great night.
Thank you all the candidates for joining it, as well as Larry, my co-host, the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast and Eastern Florida State College. Thank you all for watching us. And again, thank you all, gentlemen, for being here with me tonight virtually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isadora.
Pleasure. Thank you for hosting.
Colonel, Congressman, thank you very much.
The August 18th primary elections are right around the corner, and Florida Today is committed to helping you make an informed decision. On July 21st at 8 p.m. here on WEFS, you will meet the candidates running to represent District 3 on the Brevard County Commission. That seat covers South Brevard, including Grant, Valcaria, and parts of Palm Bay and Melbourne. Commissioner John Tabaya, his Republican primary opponent, and Melbourne Mayor Kathy Meehan and Democrat Sanjay Patel will join us for a virtual forum.